Now let's bring in Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services in Melbourne, Florida. Jeff is also brand ambassador of our very own retirement income store, and also has always been a good friend of mine and the income generation. Jeff, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Hey, Dave. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now you just heard Art Laffer talk about the fact that one of the best things that the president has done that's been successful in helping the economy is the tax changes that he was able to get through at the beginning of his presidency. Would you agree with that?
I couldn't agree with that more. The first politician or president in history to level the playing field with the same corporate tax rate as China. That's an epic thing. He does not get enough credit for that. That's what spurred a lot of growth in the economy, including lots of hiring.
So you kind of went right from the good to the bad, because you heard Art say that the best was really the taxes, and the thing that's perhaps has the worst impact on the economy. He didn't say it was a bad thing long term, but he said the worst for the economy is the trade war. So do you still think we should have handled the trade war this way, in your personal opinion, or do you think perhaps there might have been a better way?
Well, I think there probably would have been a much better way had it been a multilateral front of getting a group of countries together. But the problem is, when you do that, everyone's thinking of their own rice bowl. They're protecting their own economic rice bowl, and they're not worried about anybody else's. So it's really hard to present a unified front. With China being our largest trade partner, and trade surpluses, by the way, at their all-time high, who's getting hurt here? What is the China trade deal really doing? It's hurting sentiment in the market for global growth. That's the factor that it has on the economy and in the markets.
But you think that with the tax cut and the increase in corporate profits resulting from that it gave enough boost to the stock market? Maybe then with some of the money that was given back to individuals through the individual tax cuts, it gave enough to the economy, so that for the most part, Trump was able to engage or create this tax war and play hardball. And so far the economy seems to be withstanding it. Is that your take in the last 40 seconds or so we have in the segment?
Well, it really is. I mean, 75% of the Trump tax cuts went to corporate America. He could have done a little more for the average American. We see anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a year of savings for someone that's got $75,000 a year of income based on those tax cuts. He is thinking about, I guess, doing another consumer tax cut next year.
Good. Well, let's see what happens. And of course, we have to see, first of all, how this whole crazy impeachment thing goes in Congress, and hopefully blows right over. And then whether or not he makes it through next November. So we need to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the Fed and his influence on the Fed and whether or not it's helpful. You stay with us too. We'll be back here in a minute on the income generation, coming up in just a moment. Now let's bring back for one last segment Jeff Small from Melbourne, Florida, and our very own retirement income store brand ambassador. Jeff, you also heard Art Laffer talk about what's going on right now with monetary policy and the Fed, and he said that the Fed should listen more to the president when those are supposed to be separate. I mean, do you agree with what he said?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the Fed made a huge mistake last year in raising rates 3 times, and then they promised 3 more rate increases for 2019 in December of last year. I couldn't agree more. They should have never have raised rates. They made a huge mistake, and now they've got to follow rates because rates are adjusting without the Fed doing anything, and that's why they've dropped rates.
Now, of course, that's great, but if the president has his way, he's already politicianed, if you will, so far to have rates in the negative territory. He says if all these countries essentially don't have to pay any interest on their debt, then why are we still paying interest on our debt? So if he pushes the Fed into negative territory, I mean, is that someplace we should go?
Well, negative rates, people are going to get charged if they have money in banks like CDs and savings accounts. It'll cause people will be stuffing money in the mattress, basically. I think negative rates are used as a last-ditch effort of economic stimulus when there's no real growth in the hope of an economy, much like what they've done in Europe. There's $17 trillion of negative rates, and it hasn't lifted Europe up out of the current economic doldrums that they're in right now.
Okay. Now, I think the Fed realizes they created this flat yield curve that we had during the summertime for a while. because they raised short-term rates while long-term rates weren't cooperating and raising ahead of these hikes. So now, to reverse all that, knowing they can't really control the long-term end like they thought they could, and now they're going buying back all these treasury bills on a regular basis over the next few months, trying to further shorten or lower the short-term side to righten the yield curve. In your personal opinion, is this too little too late for the U.S. economy, or do you think this can keep the people predicting recession at bay for at least another year or two?
Well, the economy is moderating, and the Fed's trying to plug a hole in the dike and keep the expansion going. This is they're better off doing Operation Twist, what they're doing now, than doing nothing. At least they're trying to make some effort. But we know we're marching to zero because we've got too much debt, potentially negative in 2021, 22, because we've just got too much debt. We can't afford the interest. The government can no longer afford the interest on that debt. And that's why the European banks, ECB, Bank of England, they've issued all the negative debt. The Bank of Germany, et cetera, has issued negative debt because they can't afford to pay the interest. And we're right there. That's called a Japanese model. Yeah,
and you're right. Japan had it for a few decades now, and it looks like we're going down that path too. So we need to leave it there for today, Jeff, unfortunately. Thanks so much for being on the show. And you stay with us. We'll be right back here in a moment on The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you in a moment.